And welcome back to the show where we've got a very special guest on the phone right now because brand new Australian film The Rooster is about to get some very special screenings ahead of its cinema release. So we thought today we would actually get the director of the film, Mark Leonard Winter, on the phone to chat a little bit about this amazing film. Mark, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here. And just as a little note to all your listeners, if you hear a screaming 1-year-old in the background, don't be alarmed. He's fine. He's just very grumpy.
That's all right. Look, our listeners are used to hearing cats and dogs in the background because we record from home these days. So they are used to background noise. No worries there. So, but Mark,
Fantastic.
I have to say congratulations on The Rooster. I had a chance to see it at MIFF, and now I've had a chance to watch it again this week at home, and it's just an amazing film, so congratulations.
Thanks so much, and I'm so pleased you liked it. And yeah, I'm just, it genuinely just makes me so happy when people are like, oh, I really liked it, man. So I'm very pleased. Thank you.
So where did the idea for this film first come from for you?
Look, basically, a few years ago, I really sort of lost myself, really, in a battle with my own brain. I sort of was really, struggling with my mental health, and it was very scary. And you feel so alone, and the feelings that happen inside you, you feel very ashamed of, and there's a lot of sort of self-hate and a lot of self-violence, and you, when you're in that place, like, you're not really you anymore, and the world isn't really real anymore. And I sort of was fortunate enough to come through the other side, and a lot of people don't. And I was sort of looking back on that time, and I sort of was like, what was that? It was like it never existed. And it was such a meaningless vacuum, of time in my life. Like, I'd just been robbed of myself for however long. And so I wanted to make something in response to that. One, I wanted to sort of try to find the words that I felt like I didn't have when I was in that place. And I think Australian men in particular, I think Australian women obviously really battled this as well, but Australian men have a particular complication in not being able to talk about it or feeling like they're allowed to talk about it. So I wanted to try and find some words that I felt that had abandoned me in that time. And secondly, I was hoping to create something of meaning out of that time, and potentially, my wish was that I could create something beautiful out of something that was not beautiful. So that was the initial sort of spark for the idea. And secondly to that, I was like, okay, my background's in acting, and but I wanted to, sort of take this step. So I was like, okay, I have to write something that's achievable. Nobody's going to be throwing me huge amounts of money to do this because I just didn't have the track record. So how can I do this in a way that's achievable? So it was written and filmed at my house, and my wife produced it, and we shot it at my sort of surrounding areas of my home in sort of, I live a bit over an hour outside of Melbourne. And so they're the sort of seeds for how the film came together.
I think one of the things that I love about this movie, and it feels weird saying that I love it, but you wrapped it up then when you said about this film really shows what it's like to go through mental health. There's been times in my life where I've had bouts of depression, and a lot of people think that when someone's going through something like that, they're not aware that they're going through it, that only those around them are aware. But you're right, you are aware, and you don't understand why you're going through it, and you can't break free from it. I really love that comes through so strongly in this film with its characters. Can I ask, how long did it take you to sit down and write this film? And also, have you had other people say to you that that's exactly what they've been through as well?
Look, I feel like there's sort of, it's a little bit like Vietnam. You know, they talk about those sort of like people who have come back from Vietnam, and there's just this understanding between people of what you experienced over there. And my sense has been, when, you know, I've sort of encountered people who have just watched the movie, there's some sense in the way we engage, and I can see how they're holding themselves. And, you know, some people have been very, very emotional about the film, and but there's just this sort of shared thing of like, I know that space, I know that place, and I know what you were trying to talk about there, and yeah, I feel a real closeness with those people, you know, in those moments. And you know, and it's interesting with the film too. Just I was really trying to sort of present sort of how it feels, you know, as best I could, to be in that space, not,
Yep.
you know, with how the movie as a piece of work feels, with the sort of the aesthetic, the sound, the fog, you know, and sort of trying to capture that density of feeling and that confusion and that not being able to escape your own psyche in a way, that everything gets filtered through this chemical imbalance in your head, and just trying to sort of capture that as opposed to a sort of narrative sort of thing. So that was one of my goals. Very tricky to do, it turns out. And then the writing, it took a few years to develop and keep strengthening. And also, you know, just fundamentally, the challenge from the get-go is, how do you make a film that addresses this stuff in a way that anybody would ever want to see?
Yep.
You know, that anyone would want to spend time. There's a reason why, you know, being around very, very depressed people is difficult. And, you know, not only for them, for the person going through it, but for the people in their lives. It's hard, you know. So how can you find a way that's sort of compelling for an audience and still exciting and surprising and poetic and you know, and humorous, you know. And the film does have quite a lot of humor, and I think it would be sort of disingenuous if it didn't. In a way, you know, not only one, we're Australian, and that's sort of how we deal with things, is with that humour, and two, it just felt true, you know, like some of the funniest shit that's ever happened to me has been when things have been at their blackest, you know.
Yeah.
So I was really trying to kind of keep a lot of that in the mix as well.
Once you had the idea about what you wanted to do with the film, how long did it take you to come up with the idea of Dan losing Steve in the way that he does, and also the character of the hermit played by Hugo Weaving? How long did it take for you to then put that story together?
Look, there was many different seeds of things that sort of came together. So I think all up it took about 2 years to write.
Yep.
And it sort of went on, sort of a few different journeys. And that aspect of sort of Dan with his friend Steve, and, you know, that came sort of like, sort of about halfway through the writing process. And, it was interesting. He wasn't always a cop. So once I sort of opened up, that sort of really opened up a whole different sort of aspect of that character and that character's responsibility and our own relationship to police on screen, you know. And we're so used to, as, you know, viewers of Australian film and TV that, sorry, this is just international. Anytime you see a cop, that you assume that there'll be an act of heroism of some description. They'll solve the crime, save the girl, stop the bank robbery, whatever it is. And once he sort of emerged as a police officer, I realized that his act of courage was very different from that. And it was a much quieter courage that, sometimes just sort of surviving another day is an act of true courage, but no one's ever going to pin a medal on you for that. No one knows that. No one's ever going to see that. So look, I was also looking at, with that character of Steve, who is his friend, who is the sort of catalyst for events. I sort of looking at this spectrum of what happens when you sort of just disappear inside yourself. And so they're all sort of, those three men I sort of see as just further along the same line, if you will, like at different points in the same line. And Steve's obviously the most extreme, and there's been some external damage, but he's essentially sort of completely vanished inside himself. And sort of Hugo's sort of next on the spectrum, and then Dan's sort of, sort of the closest to quote unquote normal.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where those ideas came from.
Now, we mentioned some of the cast members there. Tell us a little bit about casting for this film, because you have got some absolutely amazing performances in this film. How did you go about the casting, and did you have people in mind when you were writing the film as well?
Yeah, I did. So I wrote the movie for Hugo. So I wrote that part for him. I had no idea whether or not he would do it, whether he'd be interested in doing it. I'd worked with him as an actor a few times, and I love him as a person, and I look up to him as an artist, and not only for his acting work but also his advocacy of just Australian film. Like he just believes in it so much, and the Australian voice and the importance of Australian cinema. And at times I sort of found like I needed that inspiration, because you sort of feel like, it's difficult for Australian movies to find their place in the world. And he kind of really kept a bit of wind in my sails with his advocacy of the need for Australian voice and to tackle Australian ideas. So I very, very nervously slipped him a first draft of the movie, and he was really warm about it and encouraging. He said, like, this is interesting, like, keep going. So, that's kind of all I needed to sort of, keep pushing through the drafts and developing it. And when he actually, said, all right, I'll come and do it, it was simultaneously like a miracle and then terrifying, because it was like, oh my gosh, we have to do this now.
Yeah.
Like we've got, it would be anyone's dream to get this guy in your film, and he said he's going to come and do it. And look, I owe him a great deal of gratitude, because there is no film without this guy, without Hugo. There's no movie, because he lent his name to the production. So suddenly, you're trying to get together a cast and crew for an independent film. It's always very difficult. But if you put his name on it, people give it a second thought. They sort of go like, oh, okay, is he really going to come and do it? He made the project legitimate in a sense. He legitimized this, and I'll be forever grateful to him for that, because, he didn't need to do this, and it's a scary role. It's a big character, and it's an unknown director. And yes, we were friends, but he didn't know if, this could be a disaster. And, he's showing up and, having breakfast in my shed. This is a far cry from Trailer City on a standard film. So it was amazing that that he was on board. And then what he's delivered is amazing, just beyond amazing. And then Phoenix was a recommendation from a friend. Said, like, check this guy out. And one of the producers on the movie too, who co-produced with my wife, her name is Marvin Sharaki, and she said, like, maybe have a look at this guy. He's really interesting. So I checked out some of his work, and he was in this TV show called Clickbait, and he was in a film called Below, which came out a few years ago, and which was sort of cage fights in refugee camps in Western Australia. And he just carries himself. I just needed somebody who could carry the film without displaying the film. Yeah. And he just has such a capacity for inner, sort of just holding this inner world of this movie, just, in his eyes and in his body. And he's so soft and so gentle, but there's a sort of masculinity to him. There's a strength. Obviously, he's an extremely handsome rooster, if we can say that. And look, I just also thought too, like, watching those two guys, because the two characters are sort of yin and yang, like one sort of barely saying a word and the other doesn't shut up, and watching them sort of develop that friendship and the space that they made for each other was just so special, and it takes a lot of sort of confidence too from Phoenix's behalf. You've got, like, this is like Hurricane Hugo Weaving coming at you at 200 k's an hour, and just to sort of be calm in the face of that and hold the movie, just know that your job is to hold this film. And I thought he did just such a beautiful job, and every time I watch it, I'm sort of more deeply moved by his work.
Definitely. Now, I know we are running out of time, but I had a few quick questions I wanted to ask. First of all, How did you find the experience of filming it around your own house? Because I know there's little bits in there that are very personal to you, including being scared of feeding the chickens. I believe that's something that you've experienced.
Yeah. It is something I experienced. When we bought this place, the previous owners were like, "Hey, we're taking all those 25 chickens, but there's a rooster here and two chickens that in this coop, and we're wondering whether you'd like to keep them." And we were like, "Of course, yeah, we'd love to." And our first day we were in the house, we were sort of green as grass, and we walked into the coop and we're like, "Hi, chickens, we're your new owners, and we love you." And this rooster just went crazy and chased us away and slashed up my poor wife's legs with his knives and on his feet, his talons. And we called the chickens like Celine after Celine Dion and Whitney after Whitney Houston, and the rooster was initially called Pavarotti, but then we had to change it to Charles after Charles Manson. So every day I'd go out and let the chickens out and have a shovel in my hand to ward this guy off, because he'd literally just chase me away. So there were all these little seeds that sort of came, into the movie, and but filming around the house and my area was amazing, because the script was born of a sense of aloneness and isolation, and that's where these feelings were. And then all these people showed up to make this film, to make this piece of art, or whatever you want to call it. And so it was just so special, it felt so special. It was like, bring the mountain to Muhammad or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just everyone came to create this thing with me, and it was just amazing. So, yeah.
So, Mark, to finish off, what would you like to say to people who are about to go and watch The Rooster, and what would you like them to take away from the film?
Look, I think the film is a very sort of gentle film in a sense. It's sort of opening its hand to you in a way and saying, like, have you ever felt like this? It's an invitation. It's sort of asking you to sort of be lulled into a place of experiencing this strangeness, this surrealness, this sort of frightening place, and enter into that. And I think I hope an audience can let go and take that journey, and then I hope that they experience something with a lot of humanity and a lot of humor and and ultimately a lot of hope. And I think that is important to me, that people come out the other side feeling like that they've been on this journey and that they have come out the other side. And just in a larger sense, I hope that sort of reflects the battle with mental health, that you can come out the other side. And look, I just really hope it can find the people that would love this movie and that the movie was sort of made for. And yeah, I guess I just ask a certain openness to a little strangeness is perhaps how I'd like people to go in, just to go like, okay, cool, let's see what this is. It follows a slightly different format to a normal film. I think it has a slightly different feel, and so but I think that there is something rewarding there and something moving. So yeah, and I think I do too find it very entertaining as well. So I hope that people have a good, meaningful, and worthwhile time watching it.